Welcome to the Human Archive. If you enjoy original science fiction stories about humanity finding its place among the stars, subscribe and join us for the next one. Now, let's begin. Ask first. Tessik Aruul had spent 6 years learning to notice problems before travelers had to ask about them. That was the point of passenger accessibility work. A boarding ramp that looked harmless to most people could become an impassable slope to someone with limited joint movement. A door control placed 10 centimeters too high could turn independence into a request for assistance. A beautiful public concourse could become useless if its designers forgot that some species required wider turning space, lower counters, different visual contrast, or more time between transit doors. Tessik noticed those things automatically now, which was why, when Wade Hollister arrived aboard Meridian Exchange, she was already thinking 3 doors ahead. The human emerged from the passenger transfer tube in a powered wheelchair with a compact travel case secured behind the seat. He was broad through the shoulders, though age had softened him slightly, and gray threaded the dark hair above his ears. One leg rested at a different angle from the other on the chair's foot support, and his left hand remained partly curled when he wasn't using it. Tessik had read the accessibility profile his office had sent ahead. His profile listed lower body paralysis, reduced left-hand grip, chronic pain accommodations, independent powered mobility, and assistance requirements for selected manual emergency systems and inaccessible evacuation routes. She had already arranged elevator priority, an accessible guest cabin, an emergency transfer plan, and a station mobility aide to remain on call. Wade looked at the printed welcome placard in her hand. "That's me." Tessik lowered it. "Mr. Hollister." "Wade is fine. I am Tessik Aruul. I'll be coordinating your inspection." He extended his right hand. Velathi did not shake hands traditionally, but Tessik had worked with enough humans to recognize the gesture. She took it. His grip was warm and careful. "Welcome to Meridian Exchange." "Thanks." The concourse behind him had begun filling with passengers from another arriving ship. A family stopped directly in the transfer doorway to reorganize 3 bags, 2 children, and something that appeared to be either a pet or a very nervous piece of luggage. Tessik stepped aside. Wade moved his chair with a small motion of his right hand. The crowd tightened. A traveler backed into his path. Without thinking, Tessik reached for one of the chair's rear assist handles. Wade braked. The chair stopped instantly. Tessik's hand froze an instant before contact. He looked back at her. "Ask first." The words were calm. The calm correction made Tessik more aware of what she had nearly done. Tessik drew her hand away. "I'm sorry. I was trying to help." "I know." He turned his chair enough to face her properly. "It's just part of me. Same rule you use before grabbing somebody's arm." Tessik felt heat climb beneath the fine scales at her jaw. "Understood." The travelers ahead still blocked half the doorway. She looked toward them. "Would you like assistance getting through the crowd?" Wade followed her gaze. "Actually, yes." Tessik waited. He pointed toward the family. "If you walk ahead and convince those 6 people not to establish permanent residency in the doorway, you'll be my favorite person on the station." Tessik stared at him. "There are 5. The luggage creature opened one eye. Wade nodded toward it. "I'm counting the suspicious bag." Tessik laughed despite herself. 5 minutes later, they were moving through Meridian Exchange's central concourse without difficulty. Wade's inspection began almost immediately. He did not comment first on the elevators, restroom clearances, or adjustable service counters Tessik had prepared to discuss. He stopped beside an emergency pressure door. The door itself was accessible. The manual release was not. Wade studied the lever mounted on the wall above shoulder height. "How does somebody in my chair operate that?" "They don't," Tessik said. "Emergency response personnel would activate the mechanical release." He looked at her. "And if the emergency response people are on the wrong side of the door?" Tessik's didn't have a good answer. Wade raised one eyebrow. She opened her inspection tablet. "I'll note it." "Good." He rolled forward. 20 meters later, he stopped at another control. Tessik began suspecting the next 3 days would be exhausting. By midday, they reached the engineering concourse near docking spine 3. Chief Engineer Vorasinik met them at the access barrier. Vora had worked Meridian for 17 years and wore the same expression she wore whenever someone from administration arrived carrying a checklist. It was not hostility so much as professional resignation. Mr. Hollister. Wade, Chief Engineer Scenic. Vora will do. The first name exchange eased the introduction. Behind the barrier, technicians were working around a temporary power bypass connected to a high-capacity distribution coupler. Wade studied it. Maintenance. Scheduled replacement, Vora said. The primary coupler developed contact where during inspection last month. The temporary bypass is rated above current load and has passed certification. Wade nodded. He did not question the certification. Tessik had expected him to question the certification too. She had begun expecting him to interrogate every piece of machinery he could see. Instead, he asked where the manual disconnect was. Vora pointed toward a recessed cabinet. Behind that panel. Can it be operated without station control? Yes. Wade nodded again. Good. Tessik glanced at him. You seem unusually interested in manual systems for an accessibility audit. Emergency egress is accessibility. I know. I figured you did. Vora looked between them. Should I be worried about the rest of this inspection? Wade smiled. Only if your station has ramps. Tessik sighed. It has many ramps. Excellent, I've already found my specialty. Behind the safety barrier, a technician completed another diagnostic check on the temporary bypass. Every indicator remained green. Nothing about it looked dangerous. At the time, it looked like an ordinary piece of scheduled maintenance. At the time, Tessik thought only that Wade Hollister was going to make her write a very long report. What still works? The lights went out halfway through Vora's explanation of Meridian's evacuation zoning. The lights did not dim. Or flicker, they vanished. The engineering concourse vanished. Tessik heard somebody curse. A tool struck the floor. Wade's chair stopped beside her. Then local emergency lamps woke in pale blue pools along the walls. The darkness between them remained deep. Tessik noticed the silence before anything else. The station sounded wrong. Meridian always hummed. Ventilation returned. Transit motors. And service lifts had all stopped. Thousands of small machines layered together until nobody consciously heard them. Now there was only the distant ticking of cooling metal and several frightened voices. Tessik pulled out her station communicator. No central network. She switched to emergency local, static, then a broken carrier tone. Passenger services to control, respond. Nothing, she tried again. Emergency coordination, this is Tessik Aruul in Engineering Concourse 3. A voice appeared through interference. Local only, central net is down. Atmosphere status. Unknown beyond local compartment. Tessik turned toward Wade. His chair's small running lights remained on. For some reason that reassured her. We need to move toward Refuge 3. Wade looked at her. What failed? Power. That doesn't tell us anything. Tessik blinked. The station lost power. I heard that part. He looked down the dark concourse. What caused it? I don't know yet. Then we don't know what failed. Vora emerged from the nearest engineering access with 2 technicians behind her. Her face was tight. The reactors are still running. Tessik stared. Then why are we dark? Primary distribution collapsed. Emergency generators started automatically, but the transfer logic will not connect them. Why? 3 bus sensors disagree about the isolation state. Vora raised her maintenance tablet. Its local data was incomplete, but enough remained to show warning blocks across half the electrical network. 1 bus reports open, 1 reports closed, a 3rd alternates. Wade rolled closer. What happened at the dock? Vora's expression sharpened. Heavy freighter on Spine 3 had a thruster control fault during startup. Its shutdown system dumped load back through the docking interface. The temporary bypass was inside certified limits until the transient hit. Protection opened most feeds. Most. 1 coupler response is uncertain. Vora looked toward the central engineering route. I need manual access to distribution control. Wade studied the schematic. Which life support systems have local battery? Vora looked at him. Atmosphere monitoring, pressure control, emergency lighting. Ventilation. Local reserve only in medical and refuge zones. Pressure doors. Most have mechanical closure, and local battery release. Which breakers physically opened? Vora paused. The system says Dock 3 isolated. That wasn't my question. The irritation arrived quickly. This is my station, Mr. Hollister. I know. Then let me work. Wade did not raise his voice. Absolutely. Which breakers did somebody physically see open? Vora looked back at the tablet. Then at one of her technicians. The technician shook his head. We haven't confirmed them locally. Wade leaned slightly forward in his chair. Which sections are physically disconnected from the fault? Nobody answered. The blue emergency lights hummed faintly overhead. Vora looked again at the damaged network map. Her irritation did not disappear. It changed direction. At the moment, she said, we don't know. Wade nodded. Then I wouldn't connect generators to any of it. Vora stood silent for several seconds. Tessik watched a decision happen on her face. She turned to the technicians. Cancel central restoration request. Nobody energizes a distribution bus until we confirm physical isolation. One technician nodded and hurried toward a local intercom station. Tessik looked at Wade. He was studying the dark station beyond them. Tessik had been planning how to get Wade to safety. His question had just changed what Vora considered safe to energize. Do not turn it back on. They reached the first manual distribution room 12 minutes later. It should have taken 3. The elevators were dead. That left an emergency ramp spiraling down one level through a service corridor. Wade managed it without assistance, controlling his speed carefully on the descent. His chair battery indicator dropped by 4%. Tessik noticed. She wondered whether he had. Halfway down, she asked, "Do you want to push?" "No, thanks." Tessik accepted the answer and stayed beside him. She stayed beside him. At the distribution room, 2 maintenance supervisors were already arguing with Vora over local restoration. One pointed at the station atmosphere display. Habitat Ring 2 has no forced ventilation. Vora replied, I know. We have 700 people in public shelter zones. Wade moved near the wall display. How long before carbon dioxide becomes medically dangerous? The supervisor glanced at him, apparently only now remembering the human visitor was still with them. Comfort threshold in 43 minutes. I asked medically dangerous. The supervisor frowned and checked. Longer. How much longer? Depending on species mix, at least another hour before healthy adults begin approaching serious exposure. Wade nodded toward the electrical diagram. How long does it take an energized arc in a contaminated bus to become a fire? The supervisor looked at Vora. Vora said potentially seconds. And if that fire gets into the cableway? No one answered. Wade rested his right hand on the arm of his chair. I like breathing as much as the next guy. But if you feed that bus before you know where the fault ends, you might trade stale air for burning insulation. The supervisor's jaw tightened. We cannot leave 700 civilians without ventilation because an off-world consultant is worried about a hypothetical. Vora stepped between them. He is not deciding. She looked at the bus data. The main emergency feed stays open. The supervisor stared at her. Chief. 43 minutes until discomfort threshold. We will use that time to verify the network. The room became quieter. The supervisor finally nodded. Yes, Chief. Wade said nothing. Tessik noticed that Wade did not try to claim the decision. He had made the trade-off clearer. Vora had made the call herself. The manual breaker cabinet stood at the far end of the room. Technicians opened it. The main isolation indicator showed green, physically open. 1 confirmed, 2 more remained elsewhere on the station. Vora tapped the schematic. We can try a small maintenance bus from here. Not the main grid. It would give us better local diagnostics. Wade studied the path. You're sure it doesn't cross Dock 3? As sure as the current drawings allow. That wording seemed deliberate. Wade nodded. Your station. Vora gave him a thin look. My station. Tessik thought the matter settled. The matter was not settled. The first attempt. The first restoration lasted less than a second. Vora ordered the local breaker closed. A technician engaged the manual control. The cabinet filled with blue-white light. The sound came afterward. A violent crack punched through the room. Tessik flinched backward. The technician nearest the cabinet screamed. The protection fuse blew. Darkness returned except for the emergency lamps. Smoke curled from the breaker enclosure. Wade moved immediately, back away from the cabinet. Vora was already there. Isolate it. The second technician pulled the mechanical disconnect. Tessik reached the injured worker. His right forearm was burned from wrist to elbow. The protective sleeve had taken most of the arc, but skin beneath it was already reddening. "Clinic," Vora said. "I've got him." Tessik guided the worker toward the corridor. Wade called after her. "Don't use gel until medical confirms species compatibility." She looked back. He had already turned toward Vora. "Right." The local emergency clinic was only one corridor away. By the time Tessik returned, the distribution room looked different. Vora and Wade had covered one wall with physical diagrams. They were paper schematics. Tessik stopped. "I didn't know Meridian still had those." Vora did not look away from the schematic. "Neither did I archive storage." Wade held one corner flat with his right hand, while his left rested stiffly against the chair arm. "The digital map shows how the station is configured." Tessik moved closer, and this shows where somebody actually ran the cable 27 years ago. Vora traced one route with a stylus. The maintenance bus should have been isolated from Dock 3. It was. No. Wade looked at the old drawing. That means either the fault jumped farther than your sensors show, or there's another connection. Vora's eyes narrowed. The environmental retrofit. She pulled a second sheet from the stack. Tessik watched the two of them compare drawings. The earlier argument was gone. So was the assumption that the live network map could be trusted. The failed restoration had hurt someone. It had also told them something. The station's remaining instruments were giving them an incomplete picture, not because the system was badly designed, but because the failure had left its model of the network less reliable than the physical wiring. Vora tapped 3 points across the schematic. "If the old cross-connection is still in service, we have to isolate all 3 of these before we can prove Dock 3 is dead." Tessik looked at the locations. One sat nearby. Another was across Habitat Ring 2. The third was buried behind an engineering shaft. Wade leaned back slightly. "Okay." Tessik watched him flex his left hand. The motion was small, but Tessik noticed it. Then Wade looked at Vora. "Who can reach all 3? "Senior Chief." It was almost an hour into the blackout before Tessik asked the question that had been building since the power failed. "How do you know this?" Wade looked up from the wall map. "Know what?" "What to ask?" Vora glanced toward them while marking an isolation route. Wade considered. "I used to do damage control." Tessik waited. "That means emergency work. Among other things." Vora stopped writing. "Shipboard." Wade nodded for a while. "How long?" 29 years. Tessik stared. Wade kept studying the diagram. Vora asked, "Terran Navy." "Yeah." "Rank?" That finally made Wade look up. "Senior Chief." Vora's posture changed by a fraction. Tessik did not know enough human ranks to understand why. "You ran damage control sections," Vora said. "Sometimes." "You trained them." "Toward the end." Tessik looked from one to the other. "You were military emergency engineering." Wade smiled faintly. "That's a decent translation." "And now you inspect ramps." "I contain multitudes." Vora made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Tessik glanced at Wade's chair. She stopped herself before the thought formed into a question. Wade noticed anyway. "Injury happened 11 years ago," he said. Tessik hesitated. "You don't have to explain." "I know." He looked back at the schematic. "Power compartment on Tamarack, secondary event after an explosion. Bulkhead came down somewhere it wasn't supposed to." His tone remained matter-of-fact. "That ended shipboard work. Eventually, I started teaching. After rehab, I got interested in whether emergency systems still work for the people trapped with them." Vora tapped the cable route. "This is why you were asking about mechanical releases." "Pretty much." The revelation did not produce time for further conversation. Vora found the cross-connection. The old environmental trunk tied 3 substations into the same distribution pathway. If even one remained electrically connected, the damaged Dock 3 bus could backfeed into the emergency system. She marked the locations. This one is ours. Tessik recognized the second. Habitat 2 Passenger Services. Vora nodded. The third is Engineering Shaft 9. Wade zoomed the physical map with a handheld magnifier. Access. Vertical ladder. He looked at the route, then at his chair. I can't do the third one. Tessik felt an instinctive tightening in her chest. Wade did not. He turned to Vora. Who can? Vora called one of her technicians. Vora assigned the work and the plan moved on. The people who can. Tessik volunteered for Habitat Ring 2. She volunteered because she knew the passenger routes better than most engineering crews. Vora had engineering personnel, but most were already tied up verifying local breakers and checking atmosphere systems. Tessik knew the passenger corridors better than they did. She also knew where crowds would gather when elevators failed. I can reach substation 2 faster. Vora looked at her. You know the manual isolation procedure. No. I do, Wade said. Tessik turned. Wade pointed toward the substation diagram. Vora can tell you what the equipment does. I can make sure we all follow the same sequence. Vora nodded. That works. A technician handed Tessik a local maintenance radio. Wade tested it. The signal died 2 corridors away. Fantastic. Tessik looked at him. That word sounds different when humans say it. It usually means the opposite. They found a hardwired maintenance intercom network that still functioned between selected compartments. Where it did not, Tessik would carry written isolation codes. Wade insisted on one rule before anyone moved. No action without readback. Vora looked at him. We use readback. Good. He pointed toward the 3 locations. Then we use it every time, especially when somebody thinks they already heard correctly. Vora did not argue. Tessik took the isolation sheet and headed into Habitat Ring 2. The farther she moved from engineering, the more crowded the station became. Hundreds of civilians had collected beneath local emergency lamps. Families sat on the floor near pressure doors. Shopkeepers had opened storage cases and distributed bottled water. Station staff moved through the crowd trying to separate rumor from useful information. A Velathi man caught Tessik's arm. Are we losing atmosphere? No. Ventilation stopped. Yes. His expression sharpened. That means we are losing air. It means circulation is down, pressure is stable, local reserves are holding. Tessik kept her voice steady. Engineering is isolating the electrical fault before reconnecting power. Why hasn't anyone told us? Because central communications are down. She pointed toward the designated shelter zone. Stay with local staff. If conditions change, they'll move you. He studied her face, then released her arm. The next 10 minutes passed in similar conversations. Tessik did not promise everything would be fine. Wade had not done that either. She gave people the things she actually knew. Eventually, she reached Substation 2. The powered door would not open. Tessik found the manual release. It was mounted high on the wall. For a moment, she simply looked at it. Then she reached up and pulled. The door opened mechanically. She thought of Wade sitting beneath the identical control during the inspection. What if the emergency crew is on the wrong side? Tessik entered the substation without saying anything. 3 breakers. The isolation sequence began with everyone separated by nearly half a station. Vora controlled the first breaker from the distribution room. Tessik stood beside the second. A maintenance technician named Carol waited at the third, deep inside Engineering Shaft 9. Wade remained with Vora, coordinating through local radio and wired intercom. The sound of his voice had become unexpectedly familiar. Substation 2, confirm identifier. Tessik looked at the plate. Environmental cross-die H27. Read it again. H27. Vora confirmed the sequence from the background. Carol Shaft 9. Static answered, then the technician's voice. Cross-die H28, indicator shows open. Wade replied, did you physically see separation? A pause followed. Indicator says open. Not what I asked. More static, Tessik waited. Carol finally answered, I cannot confirm blade position. Wade said, then hold. Vora's voice cut in, agreed. Nobody moves. Tessik's hand remained near the manual control. Nothing happened. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Carol returned. Mechanism stopped halfway, motor release is jammed. Vora swore, "Can you rack it manually?" "I think so." "Do not think," Wade said. "Check." Tessik heard Vora make a small, approving sound. Carol disappeared from the channel again. Habitat Ring 2's atmosphere timer continued falling. Tessik could hear people outside the substation through the closed door. A child was crying. Somewhere farther away, someone began pounding on an elevator door. The urge to do something became almost physical. Open the breaker, close it, move. Anything was better than waiting. Wade's voice returned. Tessik still holding. "Yes. Good." There was nothing dramatic in Wade's tone, only confirmation that she was still following the plan. 4 minutes later, Carol came back. "Breaker is fully racked out. Visible separation confirmed." Vora repeated the report. Wade asked for a second readback. Then he gave Tessik the next step. The sequence proceeded slowly. Vora opened the first isolation. Tessik opened the second. Carol confirmed the third. All three were mechanically separated. Wade waited for the final confirmation. Then he said, "Now we know what is actually disconnected." Tessik looked at the breaker in front of her. The station remained dark. Ventilation was still dead. Nothing visible had improved yet. Yet for the first time since the failure, they knew where the damaged grid ended. But now they could make decisions based on something they had physically confirmed. The elevators. The trapped elevator call arrived while Tessik was returning from the substation. 9 people were inside. One was an elder using supplemental oxygen. The elevator had stopped between levels during the blackout and remained there on emergency brake. Its internal battery was almost depleted. Tessik contacted engineering. "We need a rescue team." Vora answered, "I don't have one. There are 9 people trapped." "I know. I also have technicians in 3 distribution rooms, 2 reactor auxiliaries, and a smoke control inspection." Tessik closed her eyes briefly. Wade's voice appeared on the line. "Which elevator?" "Passenger lift 12. "What level?" "Between 4 and 5. Vora spoke immediately. "That model has mechanical landing access from 5. Tessik turned toward the nearest stair. "Can I open it?" "Not until the car brake is pinned." "Where?" "Service ladder beside the shaft." Wade said, "I'm guessing I'm not your ladder guy." Vora almost laughed despite the crisis. "No." Tessik reached level 5. A maintenance worker met her there. The outer panel was already open. The service ladder descended into darkness. Wade remained on the intercom with the trapped passengers. Tessik could hear him through her headset. "Everybody stay seated if you can. Nobody tries to force the doors." A frightened voice answered. "Our oxygen unit says 12%. Wade said, "Good. Keep reading that number to me every 2 minutes." "Good. It means I know what we're working with." Tessik clipped herself to the ladder. Vora talked her through the brake assembly. 2 handles, left first. Do not touch the right until you see the mechanical pin. Tessik descended. The shaft smelled faintly of machine oil. Her hands began sweating inside her gloves. She found the brake unit. "I have the left handle." "Pull until you feel resistance." She did. "Now look beneath the housing. There's a pin. Color? Yellow. Correct, rotate it clockwise." Tessik secured the brake. The maintenance worker above opened the landing doors manually. They brought the passengers out one at a time. The elder came last. Her oxygen unit displayed 8%. Tessik helped her into a portable chair. Only after everyone was safe did she realize Wade had never stopped talking to them. Wade had not climbed the ladder. He had not opened the brake himself. He had kept 9 frightened people following instructions while Vora talked Tessik through the mechanical rescue. Tessik looked down the dark shaft, then at her communicator. "Wade. Still here. They're out. Good." A pause, then he added, "Tell Vora her elevator design is terrible." Vora's voice immediately answered from the same channel. "I can hear you." "Excellent, saves Tessik a trip." Smoke. The electrical fire began in docking spine 3. The fire grew directly out of the damaged electrical system. The damaged bus that had caused the earlier arc heated under residual fault current until insulation ignited inside a cable compartment. Automatic suppression contained the fire itself. The smoke had nowhere useful to go. Dock 3's extraction fans had no main power. A passenger vessel remained locked to the station with more than 300 people aboard. Its docking clamps could not be safely released, while local guidance and pressure controls remained offline. Vora spread the new problem across the physical map. Ventilation first. Wade nodded, agreed. Tessik noticed his left hand trembling slightly when he moved a schematic. He flexed it, then tucked it against his lap. Vora traced the environmental trunk. If the 3 manual isolations are good, I can start Ring 2 circulation from emergency generation. Only that bus, Wade said. I know. No habitat lighting, no passenger systems. Vora gave him a sharp look. I know. Wade raised his right hand. Fair. She started laying out the sequence. Wade leaned over the diagram. Generator auxiliary, then circulation pump. Vora stopped. No. He looked at her. The pump magnetic bearings need stabilization power before startup. Wade checked the schematic. Right. If we energize in your order, we destroy the pump. He nodded immediately, then stabilization first. Wade did not argue or defend the mistake. He simply changed the sequence. Tessik watched something settle between them. Wade understood failure patterns. Vora knew Meridian itself. The plan needed both kinds of knowledge. Wade looked toward Tessik. How S habitat 2? Crowded air still safe. Then we do this right. Vora tapped the final sequence. Auxiliary stabilization, confirm stable, environmental pump, confirm load, then smoke extraction if the bus holds. Wade looked over at once. Your station. Vora nodded. My station. This time there was no friction in the exchange. Black start. The first black start brought sound back to Meridian for 53 seconds. Tessik stood in the distribution room with Wade and Vora while technicians waited at local panels throughout the affected ring. The emergency generators had been running almost since the blackout began, but only now did the team have a route that appeared safe enough to use. Vora gave the order. Auxiliary stabilization came online. Analog voltage indicators rose. The reading held. The magnetic bearing circuit powered. Vora waited. Stable. Wade looked at the current gauge. Environmental pump. Vora closed the next breaker. Somewhere beyond the room, a deep mechanical hum began. Tessik almost laughed. Ventilation returned. After nearly 2 hours without it, the sound felt enormous. Voices erupted over the local channel from Habitat Ring 2. People were cheering. Tessik smiled. Wade did not. He was staring at the current meter. Vora. She saw it. The draw was rising too fast. That load isn't ours. The current climbed. Vora moved toward the cutoff. Open environmental. Wade repeated it over the radio. Open environmental. All teams hold. The breaker opened. The fans wound down. The cheering on the local channel stopped with the fans. Silence returned. Vora stared at the meter. Something is still tied in. She went back to the old schematics. Tessik watched her trace the electrical route with increasing anger. Then Vora stopped. Oh, you have got to be joking. Wade rolled closer. What? Vora pointed at a handwritten amendment on a maintenance sheet. Service tie from the Habitat 3 renovation. 11 years old. On the digital map. No. Wade looked at her. Good news. Vora stared. Nothing about that sentence is good. Your documentation is wrong in a way I recognize. That is not better. It's better than wrong in a completely new way. Tessik laughed before she could stop herself. Vora did not immediately. Then the corner of her mouth moved. The old service tie connected the clean environmental bus to a section still electrically linked to docking spine 3. The black start had proven their generator path worked. It had also proven the station was not yet isolated. Vora found the tie's physical location, an older maintenance bay, vertical access, no working lift. Wade looked at the route, then at Tessik. She already knew what he was going to say, the shaft Wade could not use. I'll go, Tessik said. Vora shook her head. You need someone who knows electrical isolation. Carol. The technician from Engineering Shaft 9 looked exhausted but functional. He nodded. I can do it. Wade printed an isolation tag from a local maintenance terminal running on battery. He wrote the breaker identifier by hand as well. His left hand did not cooperate with the stylus, so he switched to the right. When Tessik took the tag, he held it for a moment. Hardware number has to match. I know. Read the plate before Carol touches anything. I know. He looked at her. Tessik sighed, and then read it again. Wade released the tag. See, I'm already becoming unnecessary. The shaft entrance was 4 corridors away. The vertical ladder led into an older station section where artificial gravity had failed with the local field grid. Carol reached the transition first. Tessik stepped through after him and immediately lost her footing. There was no floor in the way her body expected. She caught the hatch frame. Carol grabbed her wrist. Stop. Tessik froze. He clipped a tether to her harness. You have zero-gravity maintenance experience. No. Then you do what I say. Tessik looked at him. There was no condescension in his voice. Only procedure, understood. He showed her how to move hand over hand along the guide rail without pushing herself into an uncontrolled spin. Tessik followed. For the first time that day, she was acutely aware of being in an environment designed around skills she did not possess. Carol did not make a point of it. He helped. They reached the maintenance bay. The old breaker sat behind a pressure-rated enclosure. Tessik read the hardware label. H37. Carol stopped. What does the tag say? H32. They looked at each other. Carol moved his hand away from the breaker. Tessik keyed the hardwired intercom. Wade, mismatch. Static answered, then his voice. Say again. Physical breaker is H37. Tag says H32. Vora came onto the line. Do not open 7. Carol had already backed away. Copy. Vora searched the old drawing. H32 should be behind the auxiliary access plate. Carol found the panel, 4 bolts. He removed them. Another breaker sat behind it. Tessik read the label twice. H32. Confirm. H32. Vora checked the route. That is the service tie. Carol opened it manually. The blades separated. Tessik leaned close enough to see the physical gap. Visible open. Wade answered through static. Good. Carol secured the isolation lock. Tessik attached Wade's tag. For a moment she stared at it floating lightly against the breaker housing. The person who had told her to verify the hardware could not have reached this compartment. That had not prevented the correct breaker from being opened. Carol pushed gently toward the exit. Ready. Tessik clipped her tether to the guide. Lead the way. Bring it back 1 piece at a time. The second black start began almost 3 hours after Meridian Exchange went dark. Tessik returned to the main distribution room tired, thirsty, and with a bruise forming along one arm from the zero-gravity access. Wade looked worse than when she had left. He had shifted position in his chair several times, likely to manage pain, and his battery showed 21%. His left hand rested against a small heat wrap someone had found in the engineering clinic. He still noticed the bruise immediately. You all right? I met zero gravity. Did you win? No. Reasonable outcome. Vora took her position at the analog board. The station director called through restored local command and asked for full emergency power as soon as possible. Vora refused. Environmental first. We have passenger sectors demanding lighting. They can demand it in the dark. Chief, I am not feeding 9,000 people's lights into a grid I have not proven stable. Wade looked at her. Tessik saw the faintest hint of approval. Vora had already reached the same conclusion on her own. She began. Auxiliary stabilization. The first breaker closed. Voltage climbed. Vora waited long enough for the readings to settle. Stable. Environmental pump. The second breaker closed. The deep hum returned. This time the current stayed where it belonged. Tessik listened to the ventilation build through the walls. Vora waited. There was no surge. No hidden load appeared. Smoke extraction. Docking Spine 3's extraction fans came online through the isolated clean route. A station report confirmed smoke levels falling. Vora moved to the communications repeaters. Wade stopped her. Voltage first. She glanced at the meter. Stable. Okay. Communications came back in sections. The station network did not suddenly return. One local relay returned, then another. Medical facilities reconnected to stable emergency power. Pressure door controls woke. Passenger lighting returned in one habitat ring. The elevators remained dark. Tessik heard the station director request them. Vora denied it. Not yet. The director sounded irritated. For how long? Until I trust the load. Wade said quietly, I'm starting to like her. Vora heard him. I am ignoring you. Professional choice. The next circuit came online. Then another each time Vora waited. Read the voltage. Check the current. And confirm there was no unexpected load. Only then move forward. For the first time, Tessik understood why Wade had seemed so reluctant to hurry. The station had never lacked people willing to restore power. What mattered was restoring only what they understood. A new alert appeared. Central automation was rebooting. Vora stiffened. Too early. The station's control system began reconstructing its network model. Digital screens flickered back to life. Diagnostics populated. Then automated distribution recognized docking spine 3 as an unpowered sector and attempted to restore its standard feed. Warnings flashed across the board. Tessik stopped breathing. The software issued a closure command to the first isolation breaker. Nothing happened. The breaker had been physically racked out. It attempted another pathway. That one was manually opened too. Then the old service tie. No response. Carol's lock and Wade's handwritten tag sat on the breaker in the zero-gravity maintenance bay. Docking spine 3 remained dark. Everything else stayed alive. Vora stared at the board. The automation generated repeated fault notices, confused by a network that no longer matched its expected configuration. Wade leaned back in his chair. Let it complain. Vora looked at him, then at the stable voltage. She laughed. Vora laughed hard enough that everyone in the room heard it. Tessik had never heard the chief engineer laugh like that in her life. Around them, Meridian Exchange came back one careful piece at a time. Lights. Full restoration took another hour. By then, the electrical fire at Dock 3 was cold. Smoke extraction had cleared the compartment. The docked passenger ship regained clamp control and detached safely. Medical services were operating under normal emergency power. The first elevator passed inspection and returned to service. Docking spine 3 remained physically isolated. No one objected anymore. Tessik found Wade near the engineering concourse when the overhead lights finally returned at full brightness. He squinted. I liked the emergency lighting. You spent 3 hours complaining that everything was dark. Humans are complex. His chair emitted a quiet warning tone. Tessik looked down. 9% battery. The nearest operating elevator is 2 levels up. Wade checked the route display. Tessik knew what sat between them and the elevator, the long emergency ramp. He stared at it for several seconds, then at the battery indicator. Tessik stepped behind him. She did not touch the chair. Do you want to push? Wade looked back. Yes, please. He released the brake. Only then did Tessik take the assist bar. The chair was heavier than she expected. Wade supplied power through the wheels while Tessik added enough force to reduce the battery load. Halfway up the ramp, he said, You know, this thing was much less steep when I came down it. Tessik laughed. That is not how slopes work. Then I would like to file a complaint. With accessibility services. I hear they're excellent. Tessik laughed hard enough that one hand slipped slightly on the assist bar. Wade immediately looked back. Please don't demonstrate that right now. She regained her grip. Sorry. Ask before dropping me too. That is not funny. It was a little funny. They reached the top. Tessik set the chair straight. Wade engaged the brake himself. For a moment they simply stood beneath the restored lights while station crews moved around them. Then Wade glanced toward the manual door release he had criticized earlier. Tessik followed his gaze. I already added it to the report. Good. She looked at him. You're still doing the inspection. He seemed genuinely surprised. Of course. The audit report. The 3-day inspection lasted 9 days, and Meridian Exchange opened a formal failure review before the damaged electrical rooms had cooled completely. Vora led engineering. Tessik led accessibility and passenger evacuation. Wade somehow ended up in nearly every meeting despite insisting he had no authority over station policy. That did not stop him from arguing. It also did not stop Vora from arguing back. One proposed redesign lowered every manual emergency control to the same height. Wade rejected it. That makes 3 of them harder for tall-bodied species to operate under load. Tessik looked at him. I thought you wanted lower controls. I want usable controls. Vora smiled. Another proposal moved an isolation lever away from high-voltage equipment. Vora rejected the new location because it interfered with maintenance clearance. Tessik found a third location that satisfied both requirements. That became the pattern. No one received everything they proposed. The system improved anyway. Manual breaker identifiers were made visible without network access. Physical black start procedures were stored at local substations rather than only in the central database. Emergency drills began including total loss of diagnostic networking. Selected door releases were moved into broader operating ranges. Evacuation planning was revised for people unable to use ladders or long unpowered stairways. The old service tie was removed entirely. Vora took personal pleasure in that. On the 9th afternoon, Wade signed the final report. Tessik looked at the length. 183 pages. Concise. This is concise. I had notes. She stared at him. He smiled. Vora entered from the next room carrying the implementation schedule. First black start drill is in 6 months. Wade looked at the date. I'll come back. Tessik stared. You are voluntarily returning. I haven't finished complaining about your ramps. You survived a station-wide blackout, and that is what you remember. Wade set the tablet down. My priorities are excellent. Vora shook her head. Tessik had to agree. The drill. 6 months later, Meridian Exchange deliberately turned the lights off. Only selected sections. Only for the drill. It still made Tessik's stomach tighten when the central displays vanished. Local emergency lamps came on. The maintenance apprentice beside her rolled a low service chair toward the isolation panel. The controls had been relabeled. One mechanical handle had been moved downward enough that the apprentice could operate it from the service chair without compromising lever clearance. He checked the printed isolation card, then checked the physical breaker plate. Tessik watched him do it twice. Across the room, Vora waited. Identifier. The apprentice read it aloud. Vora confirmed the match. Only then did he open the breaker. The mechanical indicator changed. Visible separation. Vora nodded. Confirmed. The drill proceeded. Wade sat beside Tessik in his wheelchair, watching the analog meter. When emergency power returned, the overhead lights came on. He studied the panel. Better. Tessik smiled. The drill supervisor called the next stage from the corridor. Wade turned his chair. The route ahead passed through the same emergency ramp. He stopped at the bottom. Tessik looked at him. Wanna push? Wade studied the incline. On that thing, absolutely. Tessik waited. Wade released the brake, then they went.